All right, we're back and we're going to finish up module 4 talking or module 5. Yeah, I got to get that fixed. Yeah, module 5 talking about political participation here. So, we'll talk about this in more detail. Political participation, though, takes many forms: voting, writing or calling representatives, posting on social media, calling the police if you have a problem, demonstrating, protesting, discussing politics with your friends or family or on social media, whatever. All this is a form of political participation. And we know that some people participate more than others. What are some reasons for this? What are some variables that affect this? There's a number of them. One is education. Basically, the higher level of education you have, the more likely you are to participate. High school dropouts tend to vote at a much lower rate, say, than those who graduate high school. Those who graduate college tend to vote at a higher rate too than those who don't. So typically, the higher level of education someone receives, the more likely they are to vote and otherwise take part in the political process. Age also has a big role in this. Young people tend to vote at much lower rates than older people do. Well, we got some charts here that will demonstrate that for you here in a little bit. And that's a real problem, I would say. You ever wonder why Social Security and Medicare are such big issues in election cycles every time? It's because people who are on Social Security and Medicare vote at much higher numbers than younger people. If younger people voted in higher numbers, probably politicians would be forced to care more about their issues. Race and ethnicity. White voters have higher turnout than African American voters and Hispanic voters, though this can also be attributable to income and education levels as well. Higher income people tend to vote at higher rates than lower income people do as well. Since the 1980s, women have been more likely to vote than men too. So we'll talk about that. Here's voter turnout rates since 1980. As I said, I wanted to get a chart with 2024, but I think they're still pouring through the data for that. I mean, we're talking about 150 million voters, so it's a whole lot of data. But as you can see, in the 80s, we sort of hit peak in 92 at 67.7%, then sharply dropped in 96. 2020, though, we surged up to about 2/3, so about 2 out of 3 eligible voters actually voted. Here is turnout voters. Here is turnout based on race, age, and education levels. So increase from 2016 to 2020, we see a little over 60% of white vote, about 65% of white voters voted in 2016, got up a little over 70% by 2020. We see a little about 60% of African American voters in 2016, gained a little bit up to maybe 63% in 2020. Hispanic voters under 50% went up over 50%. Asian Americans, we see a big jump here. But still, as you can see, white voters have the highest turnout, followed by black voters. And Latinos and Asian Americans are pretty close, I would say. Look at age. Yep, as you can see, we see big jump. We see significant jumps from 2016 to 2020, but we also see the older you get, the higher it gets. And see, highest turnout altogether is among 65 plus. Remember what I said about Medicare and Social Security always being big political issues? Well, now you know. Now look at white non-college grad versus white college grad. As you can see, college grads hit over 80, about 80%, almost 80% in 2020, and then over 80% in 2020. 2016, then over 20%, or over 80% in 2020. Sorry. So there you go. Here's some voting rates among broken down more for age and education. So less than high school diploma, 18 to 24-year-olds, only 20%, 1 in 5. Bachelor's degree or higher, 60%. Some college or associate's degree, half. High school diploma only, 36%. And of course, as you get older, all these go up. But look at this, 74%. Bachelor's degree or higher, 83%. Very high. And then it drops off a little bit here. Here's turnout by gender. Only went up 2016. I couldn't find one for 2020, unfortunately, but the point remains about 1980, it was about tied. Since then, women have had a slight edge over men in terms of voter turnout. Why is that? It's a good question. I don't know the answer. There could be some explanation. There are some explanations I've heard of this is that women have had, if you compare voter turnout in the United States to the rest of other democratic countries around the world, we actually don't do very good. Most democratic countries have higher voter turnout rates than we do. And one theory behind that is that this could be because we tend to take it for granted more. Most of those countries are more recently gained the right to vote, so people there are more likely to not take it for granted. That could be an explanation, and if it is, that might fall that women, since have had right to vote for a much shorter time than men have, could also explain higher turnout among men or higher turnout among women, possibly. I don't know. So that's a question that I don't have an answer for. All right, this map here is really designed to really represent, to show the rural-urban divide. Rural vote red means, so this is 2020, so this is Biden and Trump. Red counties went for Trump, blue counties went for Biden. Looks like Trump won in a landslide, but look closer and you'll see that Biden won pretty much all the major cities: Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland. Even look at Tennessee. That little blue dot there is Nashville. This one over here is Memphis. That's a Memphis suburban county, I think, with a high African American population. Look down here at Georgia. All these blue counties here are Atlanta. Look over here, North Carolina. That's Winston-Salem area. Up here, you got New York City, Nevada, Las Vegas. So could double as a population density map, I guess you could say. That's not to say that every rural county went to Trump. If you see around here, Mississippi and these areas, but these are what's called the Black Belt because there is a very high African American population here. These are rural counties, but they have high African American populations, which is one of the reasons they go for Biden. Around here, there's high Hispanic populations too, which accounted for it. But yeah, look, I think Biden carried Nevada, even though he carried only 2 counties, but obviously Las Vegas is the biggest one in terms of population. All right, group influence can have an effect on you too. Let's talk about the Milgram experiment, shall we? This might be the most messed up thing you'll hear today. So, would you kill somebody if a guy in a lab coat told you to? Science has proven that the answer is probably yes. I'm overstating it a little bit here. But Stanley Milgram was a psychologist at Yale University, and he was interested in group and obedience to authority. So he was interested in Nazi Germany. When after World War II, many of the senior Nazi leaders were put on trial at Nuremberg for war crimes. And their general defense was, I was only following orders. I'm not responsible for what I did because I was ordered to do it. The person giving the order is responsible. I just did what I was told. And so that is one of the precedents from Nuremberg is that is not a valid defense. If someone orders you to do something illegal, you have not only a moral obligation to disobey, but a legal obligation too. And if you don't, you can be responsible as well. But Milgram was more interested in it from a psychological point of view. Like, does that really explain it? Would an average person do things like this if an authority figure told them to do it? And so he devised an experiment to find out. He came up with an experiment where he took volunteers from the area there in Connecticut, where Yale University is, and divided them into pairs. One person in the pair was assigned the role of teacher. The other person was assigned the role of student. And the student was set down at a desk against a wall. On the other side of the wall, the teacher sat at another desk. So they couldn't see each other, but they could talk to each other through the wall. The student was strapped into a device to receive an electrical shock. The teacher had a button on the desk in front of them, which they could push to administer the shock. Each time the button is pushed, the voltage level increases up to a lethal amount. The teacher is given a series of questions to ask the student. Each time the student answers a question incorrectly, the teacher is instructed to push the button to shock them. And as I said, each time the voltage increases. Milgram or one of his associates wore a lab coat, intentionally a lab coat, because doctors wear lab coats, right? And doctors are respected members of society, considered authority figures, and stood over the shoulder of the teacher. If the teacher questioned the experiment, the first response was by Milgram or his associates was, please continue. Second time, it was something to the effect of, it is imperative that you continue. Third time, it was something to the effect of, you have no other alternative. You must continue. And of course, they weren't as if they were being held there at gunpoint. They could have gotten up and walked out at any time. If they questioned it 4 times, then the experiment was called off. As you can probably guess, the student was not actually receiving an electrical shock. They were acting. They were pretending to. Each time the button was pushed, they would react accordingly. At the beginning, it would be something like, oh, or something like small discomfort. But as the experiment went on, they would respond more forcefully. Something like, oh God, my heart, at the end, and screams of pain and agony. And then after that, once the button is pushed, silence. So presumably dead. And the student believed they were actually killing the person. Now, the experiment was to see how many of the students would, or the teachers would administer the lethal voltage. And 65% of them did. So about 2 out of 3 did it just because a guy in a lab coat was standing over their shoulder telling them to do it. So this experiment has been done many times all over the world since then, and has usually come to similar results. So the answer apparently is, yeah, the average person would. And I tell this story here because this is sort of to demonstrate the effect that like fear of standing out or something does have on people. In my regular classes, sometimes I'll ask people, what do you think about, do you agree with this statement? Nobody raises their hand. And then finally one person will slowly put their hand up, and then a bunch of other people will, and usually most of the class does. Because, this is group influence, right? This can keep people to keep opinions to themselves. Sometimes it is smart to do this if you're somewhere like Nazi Germany or Russia or North Korea or China, then probably you need to keep unpopular opinions to yourself. You want to go on living. Shouldn't be that way, though, here, right? Reference groups, people that can affect someone's opinion, primary and secondary. Primary are people you deal with on a regular basis, your family, your friends, colleagues. Secondary groups are more remote, could be like union leaders, could be religious leaders, not like probably your minister that you see on a regular basis, but maybe some like more, like if maybe the Pope, if you're Catholic or something like that, somebody that you don't necessarily deal with, they're know personally, but who is influential. Could also be like pundits or authors or whatever. There's all kinds of people. Political violence. Anybody know who these people are? This is Rosalynn Carter, wife of Jimmy Carter. At the time, she is First Lady of the United States. Does this guy look evil to you? Well, it is John Wayne Gacy, who was a serial killer, dressed up as a clown, had, I think when this picture was taken, had over 30 bodies buried in the crawl space under his house. Here he is shaking hands with the First Lady of the United States. Obviously, this picture would cause embarrassment for the Secret Service, but to be fair to them, background checks only don't catch you. Background checks will come out clean if you've never been caught, which is kind of where I think Gacy was at this point. But generally, violence has been rare in our politics, though I gotta tell you, it's getting more and more of it, it seems, which is not good. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. Reagan was shot on March 30th, 1981, the day I was brought home from the hospital. So I was bad luck, I guess. LA riots in 92, of course, January 6th. We've had some anti-abortion violence, Scott Rader, Eric Rudolph. But as I said, it does seem like we're getting a little more common. I mean, granted, we're still very low compared to much of the world, and hopefully we stay that way, but we do seem to be increasing. I hope this is a blip and not beginning of a trend, but can't say for sure at this point yet. It's too soon. All right. So we have now finished module 5, which means you are halfway through this semester, through the modules. There are 10 and you finished 5 of them. Well, haven't finished yet. You finished this. Now you need to go on and read the readings, watch any other videos, and then you can move on to taking the quiz, and then you are halfway done. As always, we're at the halfway point now. So, if you do need help in this class, if you're behind, if you're struggling, time is becoming a factor. Please, if you haven't already, reach out to me if you need help. I'll be happy to talk to you and work with you any way I can. Don't wait until module 10 to do this. Do it now. Otherwise, I will see you back here for module 6. Have a good day.